This is a CNBC original. In this episode of American Greed, he's young, self-assured, and loaded.
The cars and the houses and the money, he was living a pretty fast-paced life.
Tony Elgindy claims to be a crusader, fighting fraud on Wall Street.
He wanted to be known as the greatest short seller of all time. He wanted that following.
He had a persona that he cultivated, a bad guy going good.
But this so-called good guy is running an insider trading scam. And his partner in crime is a crooked FBI agent.
This wasn't a crusade for good, it was a crusade for evil.
The rise and fall of Anthony Elgindy begins in San Diego, California. In 1988, this Egyptian-American is a 20-year-old college dropout selling sports cars. He likes the job and makes decent money pulling in a few grand a month. But one day, fate shows him another, more appealing path.
A stockbroker came in with this gorgeous young woman on his arm and was going to buy a Corvette. And this guy from the stockbrokerage world claimed to be making $20,000 a month. And suddenly Tony thought, gee, why sell cars? I should try to be selling stock.
After pounding the pavement for months, the dropout finds a brokerage house willing to take a chance on him. It's a firm with a bit of a reputation called Blinder Robinson. Some employees are seen here in this 1980s video.
They became known as Blind 'em and Rob 'em. They made markets and basically promoted their own in-house stocks, and that's pretty much all they wanted you to recommend to your customers.
It's a pump and dump operation, also known as a boiler room. Brokers make high-pressure sales pitches to investors, pumping up worthless stock. After the price soars, the brokers sell their shares. When the share price plummets, investors who hold on suffer huge losses. Blinder Robinson is not the most credible way to launch a career. But Tony Elgindy is hooked.
He was sort of bitten by the stock bug, and he wanted to stay in the securities business. Got his securities licenses along the way.
But just months after he joins, Blinder Robinson's founder, Meyer Blinder, is investigated for racketeering and securities fraud. He's eventually sent to prison, and the firm is liquidated. Elgindy finds a position at another firm, Armstrong McKinley, but trouble follows. Federal investigators suspect brokers at Armstrong of taking bribes to promote stock they wouldn't otherwise recommend. Elgindy talked about it in a 1997 television interview.
Instead of recommending IBM, Ford, General Motors to their customer, now they have an extra payment, extra incentive to recommend something they normally wouldn't recommend.
It's looking like Elgindy is 0 for 2. Both firms he's worked for in his short career have been shut down by the feds. He turns federal informant and avoids charges.
He was apparently quite helpful to the feds, but it really was his first close, I think, brush with the federal criminal justice system.
He decides his pump and dump days are over.
He said later that he sort of got sickened by that process where there were so many overvalued, overhyped, fraudulent stocks being sold.
In 1995, Elgindy starts over. He opens up shop in Dallas, Texas, and starts trading, but this time as a short seller. Rather than hoping the price of shares go up, short sellers bet on the price of stock to fall, and the bigger the drop, the more money they make. Elgindy is a new man now with a new career and a new mission. Al-Gindi wants to expose puffery, hype, and fraud, or at least that's what he starts out doing. He begins to post diatribes on trading websites like SiliconInvestor.com, giving his opinions about which stocks are overvalued and why.
Tony was very good at doing reports.
Traders, including Jeff Mitchell, sit up and take notice.
I invested in some stock, and Anthony comes along and says, your company is 4 streaks on the toilet bowl. Naturally, that gets you thinking, uh-oh, did I make a mistake here?
Al-Gindi's brash tone is entertaining. He becomes so popular, he starts his own thread called Dear Anthony.
Tony came on and he says, these companies I'm going to discuss are bad companies. I deal with overhyped, overvalued, fraudulent, promoted, spammed, or suspect equities. And no one had really done that side of the market before. So right away, he offered something different that we hadn't seen on message boards.
The ability to go online and rant and rave and educate and insult and also possibly make huge amounts of money doing it was like a narcotic for Tony. It was just like the best thing in the world for him.
But Al-Gindi's rants make him a target.
Short selling, and especially the world of penny stocks, had always been sort of the dark underbelly of Wall Street. It was a world where brokers looked like bouncers, where you had organized crime, shady dealings, all kinds of different things going on. It was a world far and off the lush Park Avenue offices of Wall Street.
In 1997, Al-Gindi sits down with the primetime news program. He claims that his short selling has put him on a mob hit list.
I received a bullet in the mail. A bullet with my name on it. 300-pound guys walking into an office, beating you up, making you do this, do this. It's happening. It's happening on Wall Street. That's not going to happen to me.
But Al-Gindi's biggest threat isn't the mob. It's the FBI. When American greed returns, see how a do-gooder turns bad.
There was always that risk, you knew about Tony, that was he going to cross the line somehow.
In 1998, 31-year-old Anthony Al-Gindi has made a name for himself as a short seller with a mission. He claims to expose overhyped companies, and that's what he does, at least for now. He makes money betting that their stock prices will fall. Traders love Al-Gindi, but companies fear him. With just a few keystrokes, his brash, caustic comments can send a stock tumbling down.
He was a kind of a boisterous character, very funny. It was kind of a show. It was entertaining. Just to be in the site would be, there was a lot of entertainment value in addition to the information that was coming through.
Mead was at 60, now it's 45.
High on his newfound fame, in 1999, Al-Gindi launches AnthonyPacific.com. Subscribers to the site pay $600 a month for access to Al-Gindi's tips and trades. Dan Cohen is one of Al-Gindi's subscribers.
It wasn't just him. It was really the collective, several hundred people sharing information and sharing the research. One after another was exposed as being a fraud, and eventually the prices went down. If you could hold a position and manage the risk, you'd make money. The culture of the site was truth and honesty.
Al-Gindi claims to be a former fraudster gone straight. He once worked for a notorious boiler room, doing pump-and-dump schemes. Using the logic that it takes a thief to catch a thief, he says he's the perfect person to root out fraud.
Tony was able to sniff them out because he had seen 100 of them before, and they all followed the same recipe.
Al-Gindi relishes his role as a supposed fraud fighter, and he even posts online video of his investigations. In one, he exposes a company that claims to have developed a new technology to remove sulfur from fuel. It sends out hyped-up press releases. Its share price soars from 25 cents to nearly $12. Elgindy tours the research and development lab and captures a less than sophisticated demonstration on tape.
We take oil and water, we mix them, put it in a beaker, and this is how it all started. Bam, that's it.
Just making fun of this device that had all these like foil and wires and all that sort of stuff. And I thought that was really sort of, in a way, funny, you know, or brave.
Life couldn't be better. He's a success. People respect him. And he's raking in more than $1 million from subscribers' fees and claims to be making $75,000 a month on trades. He lives in an upscale neighborhood north of San Diego and splurges on a fleet of high-end luxury cars decked out in personal flair, a zero-bid license plate.
When a company goes to zero, when the bid's zero, it means that there's the stock is worthless. So, and that's how he was paid for the car, was by selling stocks that were going to go to zero.
Tony had a Ferrari. He had several cars, all fire engine red. He loved red cars. Lived the life of a pretty well-to-do guy. You know, he was only in his, early 30s?
He needed to feed an image that he was this powerful guy making all this money. The cars and the houses and the money and limo drivers, you know, he was living a pretty fast-paced life.
The huge house and fast cars are nice, but what he craves is building the perfect image. Elgindy claims to be a philanthropist.
Welcome back to our coverage of the crisis in Kosovo.
In 1999, he goes on MSNBC to talk about his humanitarian efforts to help refugees from Kosovo.
Mr. Elgindy, let me start with you.
And in true Elgindy fashion, he braves the war-torn areas of Kosovo, aiding refugees and helping some to the U.S.
I was on vacation in Hawaii at the time, and I made a decision that I would fly out there and postpone my own business concerns for a temporary period of time to see what it is that I could do to help.
He was always trying to help the little guy and do the right thing and be a good person. It was kind of within his character that it wouldn't be enough for him to just write a check to the Red Cross, which is what an ordinary person would have done. You know, he wanted to like have the cash in his pocket and go to the refugee camp and hand the money to the needy people.
Though he raises $48,000, questions arise about just how much goes to refugees and just how much goes into Elgindy's pockets.
This is a message that Tony wrote about Kosovo.
Elgindy attempts to justify his actions in a lengthy online post. He rambles on about how his small cash donations make a huge difference to the refugees. And in an effort to prove his goodwill, he includes dozens of letters from those he helped. But he grows tired of dodging accusations. He turns his attention to the website, AnthonyPacific.com, where he's appreciated, and puts all of his energy into making it even bigger and better. Business thrives. In 2 years, he rakes in nearly $3 million in subscribers' fees. Online, Elgindy gloats about the rapport he's building with law enforcement agencies and boasts about initiating new federal investigations.
In Tony's own mind, he was sort of a quasi-law enforcement official himself doing what he did. So he liked talking to those kind of people and giving them information that, you know, he thought they could use that would be helpful.
In 2000, Elgindy meets a 37-year-old FBI agent named Jeff Royer. Before long, Elgindy and Royer forge an unusual relationship. It's a relationship that changes the mission of Anthony Pacific from being above board to breaking the law. On the clock, Royer investigates crimes on an Indian reservation in Gallup, New Mexico. But after hours, he works Elgindy's investigations. And what he's doing is highly unorthodox, if not illegal. Elgindy gives Royer the names of companies that he thinks might be perpetrating fraud. Royer runs the information through restricted, highly confidential FBI databases to see what the feds have on the company. Royer speaks to American Greed in a telephone interview.
I would go on the computers in the FBI, and I would search for that company. I would search for the president, vice president, CEO, CFO, whatever. I would do a complete search and see if there was any SEC or FBI activity on this case.
As an FBI agent, he had the sort of keys to the whole law enforcement library of what federal law enforcement was doing. It was everything from the write-ups of interviews with the witnesses, descriptions of how investigations were being conducted, descriptions of sources, people that were providing information to the government.
If he discovers inside information, he funnels the news to Elgindy.
The truth was that he was stealing information from the FBI, and they were using that information to target specific companies for short selling, stock price manipulation, and extortion.
In 2000, Elgindy believes there's fraud taking place at Seaview, a company pitching underwater cameras. Royer taps into FBI databases and discovers an ongoing probe into the Florida-based business for issuing deceptive press releases. He passes the tip to Elgindy. Now, armed with information only investigators would know, Elgindy shorts the stock and tells his Anthony Pacific subscribers to do the same.
It was integral to the scheme that the site subscribers trade on the stock, because this is a short-selling scheme, and the idea is that the short selling combined with the eventual publication to the general public of negative information can push down the price of the stock.
After Elgindy's attack, Seaview's stock plummets more than 70% of its value in 90 days. Eventually, the SEC files suit against the company. But not before Elgindy boasts about making out with $750,000 in a single trade. It's not pretty, it's not nice, and it's not legal. Next on American Greed, does Elgindy have the ultimate inside tip and profit on a national tragedy?
There are disturbing new developments that a notorious trader...
This person may actually have known of the attacks.
By 2001, Anthony Elgindy, a trader, is living the American dream. He's living a life of luxury and basking in internet fame. But it's all about to end. On September 11th, the world is shocked by the devastating attacks that left nearly 3,000 people dead. The markets go dark for more than a week. As crews sift through the ashes of Ground Zero, hoping to identify the remains of victims. The government follows every conceivable lead. The Department of Justice turns to Wall Street, looking for potential profiteers of this merciless act.
There was a task force that was put together after 9/11 to investigate whether or not anybody had traded in advance of 9/11 with potential knowledge of the 9/11 events.
The FBI fields a number of tips, including one from a San Diego broker who says his client, Anthony Elgindy, wanted to liquidate his accounts the day before the 9/11 attacks.
This broker contacted the FBI and had explained that this Egyptian stock trader had requested to liquidate these accounts and that the market was done. That's what triggered these events that brought us into the investigation.
Dave Shavs is a supervisory special agent with the FBI and launches an investigation into Elgindy.
We began by taking an aggressive look at his trading records, telephone records, wire transfers, monitoring internet traffic.
Agents go undercover, posing as subscribers on AnthonyPacific.com. But instead of finding ties to terrorism, agents notice something else. Elgindy's reporting sensitive information on his website that only FBI agents would know.
We could start to see postings that a government official had reported that XYZ company or an individual, a principal or CEO of a company, was in trouble with the federal government. He would use that information, knowing the direction of the case, that the FBI was involved in it.
Shavs and his team follow a trail of phone records, emails, and wire transfers. And it leads them back to the FBI, to Jeff Royer, an agent in Gallup, New Mexico.
It was extremely unusual for someone that works in Gallup, New Mexico, who works crimes on American Indian reservations, to have queried nearly 3,000 companies when he has no business doing so. That immediately gave us pause and concern for what Mr. Royer was doing.
Not knowing the full scope of Royer's relationship with the internet trader, the FBI interviews the New Mexico-based agent. Royer speaks with American Greed by phone.
They wanted to know what files I had looked at. They wanted to know what my relationship with Tony Elgindy was, how exactly the information was flowing, the computer checks, telephone calls. They asked it all.
Royer maintains he's done nothing wrong. He says he's sharing information because he's working a source. But the government sees it differently.
It's a one-way street. You provide information to the government doesn't provide information to you. And that was clearly completely outside the mission of Mr. Royer, completely outside the mission of the FBI. And it was clear from that that this wasn't a crusade for good, it was a crusade for evil.
To Royer, the writing's on the wall. His FBI days are over. 1 week after the interview with the feds, he turns in his badge. He packs his bags for the sandy shores of San Diego, where he goes to work for Elgindy full-time. But as the FBI learns, the job offer was part of the plan all along. Elgindy has promised Royer a job and a portion of his trading profits in exchange for access to his FBI files.
I think Elgindy always used Royer for the information flow from the FBI. He actually postponed his hire date on several occasions so that he could continue to get that information. It was only when we started to speak to Royer that he decided he was going to resign now instead of face the inquiry that was about to take place.
To the FBI, it appears that Agent Royer is leaking confidential FBI information on white-collar crime to Elgindy.
Royer would identify companies that were under investigation in the FBI, convey that to Mr. Elgindy. Mr. Elgindy would take a position, his site members would take a position, and then that information would be broadcast throughout the internet, collectively to create this negative sentiment towards these stocks.
And even though Royer's left the FBI, he keeps the scam running. He has a mole on the inside. His girlfriend, FBI agent Lynn Wingate. The petite blonde takes over where Royer left off and keeps the information flowing and the scam running. Shavs is stunned to learn of a second agent on the take.
We were a little blown away with that because now the case is kind of creating a larger circle. We didn't know how extensive this was. It was bad enough one of our own was involved, but now we have a second agent that could be involved.
The FBI estimates that with the information Royer and Wingate have supplied him, Elgindy has pocketed more than $3 million. He's cashing in and boosting his internet status.
Making himself look good was very important to him because it enabled him to manipulate his site members into trading at his instruction and gave him increased visibility and increased seeming importance with respect to the markets.
And, never one to let any opportunity slip by, he's found another way to use his insider knowledge: blackmail. In one instance, Royer feeds Elgindy information that the CEO of Nuclear Solutions, Paul Brown, has a criminal record. It's like a pot of gold. By law, CEOs of publicly traded companies must disclose their criminal history. Elgindy broadcasts the information, shorts the Nuclear Solutions stock, and tells his website subscribers to do the same.
And then through a series of threatening telephone calls and contacts, essentially Mr. Brown was given the proposition that either he, makes Mr. Elgindy go away by providing him free stock or very low-cost stock, or he will see his company destroyed.
Desperate to get Elgindy off his back, the CEO agrees to give him 350,000 shares in exchange for dropping the virtual attack.
The CEO essentially gave in to the extortion demands, gave a block of stock to Elgindy, and Elgindy then shared the block of stock with the other subscribers who had also short-sold.
As the FBI uncovers the Elgindy scheme and the scope of the conspiracy grows, so does the urgency to stop Elgindy. During the course of its investigation, the FBI learns Elgindy has wired $350,000 to a bank in Lebanon.
He had transferred money to Lebanon. He'd bought an apartment in Lebanon. He'd opened a securities account where his address was listed as being in Lebanon.
The pressure mounts for investigators. They fear Elgindy may be preparing to run. And the Bureau has a leak. FBI agent Lynn Wingate.
She apparently had gone on the computer like in May and saw that I was actually being a target of investigation. That's when she called me, told me that I should distance myself from Tony. That's all she told me. And she would prefer it if I came home and just got away from him.
Up next on American Greed, Elgindy takes on a new identity and makes a break for it.
He was stopped by TSA, who questioned him, and he proceeded to tell a string of lies.
For more than 6 months, the FBI has been watching short seller Anthony Elgindy and former FBI agent Jeff Royer. The two were working together to steal confidential information from FBI files. They are using that information to cash in with an insider trading scam. Elgindy, once a car salesman, now has his own Hummers, Ferraris, and a mansion. But his run is about to come to an end. The FBI knows he's stealing information and trading on it. Agents make their move to bring him down. On May 22, 2002, Elgindy is arrested at his office near San Diego. Jeff Royer is arrested at a friend's office.
I was down talking on the phone, looking out, saw my friends, the SWAT team, enter like a side of another building or run up the alleyway. I said, it's kind of cool. Our SWAT team's here doing something at a place next door, and next thing I know, they're right in front of us, and I'm in cuffs.
Investigators raid the homes and offices and find more evidence to support their suspicions.
We found hundreds of documents from our database, sensitive, top secret, secret classifications, information that in the wrong hands could be damaging to the FBI. We found a number of criminal checks on various presidents of companies, CEOs, and other executives.
Elgindy and Royer, along with Royer's girlfriend, FBI agent Lynn Wingate, are charged with insider trading, racketeering, and obstruction of justice. For Elgindy, an Arab American, the timing couldn't be worse. The country is still reeling from the 9/11 attacks.
One of the prosecutors raises the information in which he alleges that Anthony Elgindy had pre-knowledge of 9/11, and not only didn't he report it, he tried to profit from it.
The news causes a media storm.
There are disturbing new developments that a notorious traitor...
This person may actually have known of the attacks.
It was hard to imagine in early 2002 to say anything worse about somebody in the United States than that they may have known in advance about the 9/11 attacks and that their only reaction was to try to profit from it in the stock market.
Eventually, the firestorm calms down. Elgindy is not charged with profiting from 9/11, and his attorney vehemently denies he knew anything about the attacks.
It is racial profiling. Anyone that's from the Middle East now is, you know, the government suddenly is looking at them. It was just common knowledge that the market was falling. The funds weren't even liquidated till September 18th.
Elgindy posts bail of $2.5 million. He's free for now. He's looking at up to 20 years in prison. Prosecutors are preparing to take their case to trial when Elgindy makes a break for it.
I got a call from the FBI telling me that he'd been arrested by state authorities or local authorities in Long Island.
Airport authorities stop the embattled short seller as he attempts to pass through security using a fake ID.
He was going through and his ticket had this other name, Manny Velasca, and he presented his ID, which I believe was a Montana identification.
He might have made it as Manny, but he's forgotten something. He's just come from a visit with his lawyer. He has a visitor pass with his real name, Tony Elgindy, on it. The TSA agent notices the discrepancy.
Mr. Elgindy tried to deceive the officer by telling her that, in fact, Elgindy was the person he was visiting. And then he provided a false story saying that he was a jeweler.
They search his belongings and come across his real ID.
The officer pulled out his driver's license from California that had Mr. Elgindy's name on it and said to Mr. Elgindy, Manny, you want to tell us who you are? And at that point, Mr. Elgindy sort of dropped his head and eventually admitted that he was not Manny Velasca.
Authorities also discover Elgindy's traveling with $30,000 in jewels, $25,000 in cash, and dozens of blank checks. In a Brooklyn courtroom on November 1st, 2004, opening arguments begin in the insider trading trial of Anthony Elgindy and Jeff Royer. Prosecutors allege that Elgindy used his Anthony Pacific site, or AP, to get his followers to do his bidding, much like a criminal gang leader.
The AP site was the engine of the conspiracy. It was the enterprise of the conspiracy, and site members, wittingly or not, were participants in the conspiracy.
Trading on FBI secrets was only the first part of the scam. El-Guindy made his trades much more lucrative by getting his legions of followers to short a stock too. Through his website, he was driving down prices, manipulating the market.
This particular conduct was coordinated in a way that was meant both to take advantage of the information to target the companies, but also to take advantage of the way of releasing this information and coordinated trading in a way that it could put maximum pressure on thinly traded stocks.
Dan Cohen, an El-Guindy supporter, is prepared to take the stand until he gets cold feet.
An article in the Wall Street Journal quoted the prosecutor saying that any members of Tony's site that testified at the trial from the U.S. government's perspective would be self-incriminating themselves.
The case turns to the defense. Former FBI agent Jeff Royer takes the stand. He says his motivation for sharing FBI secrets with El-Guindy was pure. He was trying to help the FBI on its own criminal case.
I thought my job as an FBI agent was to get as much information as I could to shut these companies down and to stop the stock fraud. I don't know why that's so hard for people to understand, and the government just wasn't buying it. I didn't make a single penny on it. I never asked him for a penny. There wasn't really any financial quid pro quo.
The defense team also points out that the majority of companies that El-Guindy publicly attacked with highly confidential information are in fact involved in fraud. In other words, Anthony El-Guindy was simply doing what he claimed to do, exposing shady companies and shorting their stock. The government isn't buying it. Whether the companies were fraudulent or not, El-Guindy still tried to manipulate the market.
He used that privileged access to take advantage of his position, to sell, and of course for each sale there's a buyer on the other side who's now got a stock that you know is a scam and you're laughing all the way to the bank. So yeah, some of the information that was right, much of it was right. Much of these companies were scams, but Mr. El-Guindy had no right to take advantage of his personal FBI agent to get that information and disadvantage the other market participants.
Next on American Greed, the internet stockbroker makes a final trade, swapping a life of luxury for one behind bars. After 3 long months of trial, the fate of Anthony El-Guindy, the notorious short seller, lies in the hands of a jury.
We're just learning that Dow Jones reports a verdict has been reached in the criminal trial of Anthony El-Guindy.
On January 24, 2005, the jury finds El-Guindy guilty on charges of insider trading, racketeering, and extortion. His FBI sidekick, Jeff Royer, is also convicted on securities fraud, racketeering conspiracy, and obstruction of justice charges. American Greed speaks exclusively to Royer from federal prison by telephone.
I think the story that they were trying to tell and the reaction was getting from the juries that they were buying the government side to it. It didn't surprise me, the verdict, when they read it. Obviously crushing because I knew what it was going to mean.
It means time behind bars for both Royer and El-Guindy. In June 2006, El-Guindy makes his final appearance in a Brooklyn federal courtroom. He makes a plea for leniency and seems to do more harm than good.
To the very end, Mr. El-Guindy, who went on for an hour talking about himself, his ego got the better of him, as I think it did throughout the time that he was involved in the securities industry. His narcissism, his ego, his desire to be front and center, to inflate himself at the expense of others, was communicated through the trial and through sentencing to the judge, and he gave him a sentence that indicated that.
El-Guindy is sentenced to 11 years behind bars.
The judge afterwards called Mr. El-Guindy a master manipulator. He said that in all of the years that he's been a judge or a lawyer, Mr. El-Guindy was perhaps the most manipulative person that he'd run across.
After taking home $364,000 from insider trades, Elgindy must pay back $1.5 million for his role as leader of the conspiracy. He must forfeit his possessions, including his glamorous home. Prison officials denied a request from American Greed to interview Elgindy. Elgindy's co-conspirator, rogue FBI agent Jeff Royer, is convicted of stealing confidential FBI information and gets 6 years in prison. It seems his only regret is not taking a plea.
I had no idea that the sentencing would be that rough. I was thinking, because I was offered a 3-year plea. If I would have taken a plea early on, offered 3 years, and I had no clue I was going to get 6 years.
In all, 6 others are charged in the conspiracy and plead guilty, including FBI agent Lynn Wingate. The federal agents and prosecutors who worked the case are saddened that Royer, one of their own, was corrupted.
The conduct of this one agent tarnishes the badge of the FBI. We don't find people like this. They find us. And although there's a very strict hiring process here in the Bureau, no matter where you are in corporate America or elsewhere, every once in a while you're going to have somebody that comes in that doesn't have the right intentions.
But they say, ultimately, the case reassures them that the system works.
This scam may have gone on for some time. It was destined for failure ultimately, because at some point when you use FBI resources, the FBI is going to catch on. He used SEC resources, the SEC is going to catch on. So to some extent it was doomed by failure, but 9/11 certainly accelerated that process.
It just goes to show that the FBI is not going to tolerate that kind of behavior within its ranks. It was an extraordinary investigation, and the amount of resources and the personal and professional dedication of all the agents involved. It was really a shining example of how a law enforcement agency addresses a problem from within.
It's Elgindy's insatiable desire for more that leads to his own undoing.
Elgindy used his intelligence in the wrong way. I think he could have been a very productive person, a very accomplished trader, if he had his values where they should be. If you're out there doing wrong, there's going to be some event that's triggered that's going to have the FBI looking into you. For whatever reason, the way this world works, that seems to catch up with you almost every time. That greed will catch up with you.